He may even identify himself with it and believe that he is what he appears to be.
Hello, listeners of the NCE Study Guide podcast. This is Glenn, and I'm writing a book, and I'm looking for beta readers. And I know you guys are here to study for the NCE, but if any of you are interested in being a beta reader for me and giving me some feedback on this book, I'm going to include the preface and the introduction here. So if it piques your curiosity and you'd like to be involved, you just send me an email to ncestudyguide@gmail.com. I hope you're enjoying these modules. If you're interested in a deeper dive, there are 91 additional modules on Patreon, which are yours for the low cost of just $5 a month. And some of you have asked about the meditations. I haven't done any more NCE Study Guide meditations, but I could if there's enough of an interest. So if you're interested in that, also send me an email, let me know, and I could create more of those. And if you're having a difficult time studying for this exam and you feel like there's something wrong with you, I just want you to know, you're not broken. You're just rewiring. Always. You'll understand more of what I mean here in a moment. Welcome to You're Not Broken, Just Rewiring, a free audiobook podcast by me, Glenn Osland. Preface. Is it just me, or do you sometimes feel like a really cool bear claw pendant buried deep beneath layers of dirt in an archaeological excavation, just waiting to be uncovered? I don't mean that solely as a metaphor, although I do mean it mostly as a metaphor. Sorry, Mom. When I shared an early draft of this book with my mom, she said I might be using too many metaphors. She's not wrong. But metaphors help me see things in a different way. And honestly, seeing things differently is kind of the whole point of this book. So, just for a little while, just for fun, I'd like to invite you to look at yourself from a different perspective. Not a false one, a real one. Just different from what you might be used to. Not the usual story of who you are, your roles, your responsibilities, but from the perspective of your nervous system, an ancient, intelligent system still living and adapting within you. What if your oldest ancestor wasn't a person, but a cell? What if the real you began 4 billion years ago as a single living thread of intelligence? Or 700 million years ago as a flicker of awareness in the first cluster of neurons? What if you're not a single self, but a community of trillions of cells, each one shaped by evolution to survive, adapt, and thrive together? What if your anxiety, your compulsions, your shutdowns, or outbursts aren't signs of failure, but signals? The ancient language of your nervous system trying to bring you back to balance. That's how I've come to see it, and that's what this book explores. I'm not writing as a neuroscientist or a guru, but as a soul-centered, trauma-informed clinical therapist who spent a year interning with court-mandated domestic violence offenders. We used a neuroscience-based brain change curriculum, and that experience changed me. Working with those men, hearing their stories, witnessing their pain, watching the internal walls they'd built for survival, showed me how our nervous systems are constantly adapting, often without conscious permission. What looks like brokenness is often brilliance in disguise, coping strategies shaped under pressure, long before understanding was possible. That's not an excuse. It's a frame, a way of seeing. Because thriving starts with how we see. And what I saw in them is what I hope you'll begin to see in yourself. Not a problem to be solved, but a process unfolding. Not a flaw to be fixed, but a system trying, always, to return to coherence. I've learned to meet that process with what Carl Rogers calls unconditional positive regard. It's a posture also echoed in many wisdom traditions, Maitri in Buddhism, Chesed in Judaism, Agape in Christian thought, Ubuntu in Southern African philosophy. Different names for the same stance, a deep recognition of worth that exists beneath behavior, a willingness to stay present with the parts that hurt. That's what I try to hold when I sit with clients, and that's what I hope to hold for you as a reader, too. All of my own identities, therapist, life coach, podcaster, former academic, imperfect dad, wandering soul, have shaped how I think about thriving. They inform the metaphors I reach for. They color the language I use. And they've helped me land on this. The nervous system doesn't speak in words. It speaks in patterns, in impulses, in symptoms that make us pause. And that brings me back to the bear claw. Years ago, I visited an archaeological dig at Bear Lake in southern Utah. I expected something exciting, but what I saw was slow, gentle. The archaeologists weren't digging with shovels, they were brushing away sediment with delicate, whisper-soft bristles. Swift, 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 yawn. Then they'd sift the loosened soil through a screen, searching for something tiny and precious. Hours of effort, not much reward. Until one day, they uncovered a Native American bear claw pendant, small, beautiful, ancient, and worth every swift. I think about that a lot. The way thriving doesn't come with shovels. The way we brush, sift, pause, repeat. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's deliberate. Because something essential is waiting beneath the surface. Not to be corrected, but uncovered, appreciated, loved for exactly what it is, no matter how long it's been buried. Isn't that what therapy is like too? Layer after layer, habit after habit, each one shaped by lived experience, some helpful, some not, all trying to help us survive. Even the behaviors we wish we could change, the procrastination, the reactivity, the scrolling and numbing, are often signals from a system doing the best it can, not optimal, but understandable. When I can see people that way, through the lens of adaptation instead of pathology, it changes how I respond. It softens judgment. It invites curiosity. It helps me feel safer in my own system, too. That doesn't mean all behavior is okay. It doesn't mean consequences disappear. But it does mean we begin from understanding, and that creates space for something new. So, that's what this book is. Not a doctrine, not a manual, a reflection, a reframe, a conversation. Between neurons, between stories, between the parts of you that want to thrive and the parts still holding on. You'll find metaphors here, also neuroscience, folklore, psychology, speculative ideas, a few theories, a lot of questions. Some of it is grounded in research. Some of it stretches toward possibility. Because I tend to think more in terms of function than strict form. That distinction between what something is and what it does will come up a lot in this book. So if you feel something stir while reading or listening, pay attention. If something annoys or resonates or confuses, notice that. That's your nervous system talking. There's no wrong way to read this book. Your response is the point. Because you're not broken, you're rewiring. And somewhere beneath the surface, something beautiful is waiting to be loved. Author's note: how we got here. Sometimes life gets a little bumpy. I was 14 years old, rafting the Upper Salt River in Arizona with my Boy Scout troop when our raft flipped. Before we even reached the infamous Quartzsite Falls, a steep drop too dangerous to run, we were in the water, tumbling, disoriented, no up, no down, just current. I remember the river guide's safety talk before we got on the water. If you fall in, don't panic. Grab the rope. Hold the raft until it calms. If you're feeling brave, pull yourself up on top and ride the rapids out from there. So I tried. I grabbed. I climbed. I slipped. I went under. No breath, no bearings, no way to simply don't panic. And then that old phrase surfaced in my mind. Heavenly Father, please. A prayer I had practiced for years. And then something shifted. I stopped fighting, and the river, in its strange wisdom, carried me into an eddy, a swirling pocket of calm at the edge of chaos. I caught my breath. I reset. Eventually, I made it back. We portaged around Quartzsite Falls that day, disassembled the raft, hauled it over the rocks, rebuilt it on the other side. It took hours. But life hasn't always given me that option. When the bigger drops came later, divorce, job loss, faith crisis, I didn't get to portage. I went over and through and down, churning and churning again and again. And I'd be lying if I said I don't still feel it. This book is for anyone who's been there, in the churn, when the path disappears, when the person you thought you were no longer fits. I never planned to become a therapist, or a podcaster, or someone writing a book like this. I started out as a folklorist. I earned a Master of Arts in Folklore and Mythology, training to become a professor. I studied how stories function, not just what they say, but how they shape identity, encode survival strategies, and carry wisdom across generations. I loved teaching. I thought that would be my path forever. But the river had other plans. I left academia before finishing my PhD to explore the world. For the next 13 years, I worked in global healthcare, overseeing medical device networks across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. The company's motto was, always do what's best for the patient, and I loved that. But over time, I saw how the incentives didn't always align. What patients needed wasn't always what got prioritized. That gap between stated values and lived reality stayed with me. Then came another wave, the slow motion collapse of a belief system I once considered absolute. I was raised in a high-demand religious tradition, and when it stopped making sense, I lost more than just doctrine. I lost community, direction, belonging. To process, I co-created a podcast with friends called Infants on Thrones. A space to laugh, rage, grieve, and reimagine. That's where I first encountered the term cognitive distortions, a concept I'd never heard in church, but instantly recognized in my body. Catastrophizing, black or white thinking, emotional reasoning, the mental reflexes that feel like truth but function like folklore. Maybe the way I was raised impacted me more deeply than I really knew. That realization hit me like another eddy. Only later did I learn that these distortions weren't flaws. They were patterns, coping mechanisms, echoes of survival. It lit something up in me. I became a certified life coach under Alan Cohen, His metaphors worked like flashlights for the soul. His teachings didn't give me answers, but lenses. I began coaching individuals and groups, helping them reframe the stories shaping their lives. It felt like folklore again, only more personal, more alive. And my hunger grew. I wanted more structure, more rigor, more tools. So I went back to school and earned a Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. For my internship, I worked with domestic violence offenders in a neuroscience-based brain change program, 3 nights a week, group after group, story after story. And something happened I didn't expect. I saw myself in them. Not in their actions, but in their patterns, in the unresolved trauma, the overlearned defenses, the struggle to pause and reflect before reacting. And I realized what looks like brokenness is often adaptation, an intelligent system doing what it was wired to do with the resources that it had at the time. That insight rewired something in me, not overnight, not all at once, but enough to reshape the way I listen, enough to inspire this book. This isn't a memoir, and it's not a manual. It's a spiral, a journey through glitch and signal, story and symptom, myth and mind, a conversation between the folklore you inherited and the nervous system that inherited you. It's a pause, a breath, a space to consider what's happening, not as failure, but as transformation, not as brokenness, but as rewiring. So, if you've ever gone over the falls, if you've ever tried to hold on but lost your grip, if you've landed in unfamiliar waters wondering who you are now, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just rewiring. Always. Introduction. You're not broken. You're just rewiring. Is it just me, or do some people seem to be doing everything right and still feel like something's off? Maybe you've been there too. You show up, you do the therapy, you journal, you meditate, you drink the green juice, download the mindfulness app everybody's talking about, try the cold plunge. From the outside, you're fine, maybe even thriving. But inside? There's static, a strange disconnection, a feeling like your internal weather doesn't match the forecast, like the radio's tuned just slightly off the station, like you're living in 2 realities, one that works on paper and one that hums with a quiet ache. If that's you, if that's ever been you, then welcome. This book is for you. You're not broken, you're rewiring. And I don't mean that as a clever affirmation to tape to your mirror. I mean it literally, biologically, psychologically, spiritually. You are a living system that adapts, constantly, sometimes consciously, mostly unconsciously. And when that wiring begins to shift, when old survival patterns start to glitch, healing doesn't feel like harmony. It feels like friction, like tension, like dissonance. But the glitch? That's not failure. That's signal. That's where this book begins. A book built like a nervous system. This isn't a 10-step plan. It's not a linear map or an expert's guide to fixing yourself. Because thriving doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals. Maybe you've said to your therapist, I know what I should do, but I just can't seem to do it. Maybe your brain feels stuck in replay mode, running the same scenarios again and again. Maybe your relationships keep cycling, different faces, same patterns. Maybe your life looks solid from the outside, but deep down, something doesn't quite connect. That's where this book meets you. Because behavior is only part of the story. Beneath every pattern is a function. And once you learn to sense it, to feel it, something starts to shift. That shift is the foundation of how I work. It's also how this book is built. Why form versus function matters. I hold degrees in both folklore and mythology and clinical mental health counseling. One taught me how stories behave, how myths evolve, how symbols encode survival. The other trained me to track nervous systems, trauma patterns, and evidence-based change. Together, they have been teaching me this. Meaning isn't just found in form, it's revealed in function. This book loops between those layers, between science and symbol, between myth and mechanism, between the story you think you're living and the systems shaping that story beneath your awareness. Each chapter is a spiral, a question, a metaphor, a glitch, a reframe, a return, a reminder. Not to explain everything, but to help your system recognize itself. The spiral has 3 turns. Part 1, Origin and Initiation, chapters 1 through 6. We begin where many people enter therapy, the symptom that won't resolve, the emotion that doesn't make sense, the pattern that won't stop repeating. These early chapters explore your roots, cultural, psychological, biological. It's the dragonfly in the mud, armored, instinctive, submerged, and beginning to climb. Part 2, Spiraling Toward Union, chapters 7 through 12. Here the spiral tightens, meaning deepens. The first half explores esoteric systems, sources of inspiration, instigators of reflection. I offer these not as dogma, but as symbolic blueprints. They stir archetypes. They echo something deep in the psyche. The second half grounds those same insights in clinical science, polyvagal theory, brainwave states, trauma research. It's a conversation across hemispheres. One side speaks in myth, the other in mechanism. Together, they tune your nervous system toward coherence. Part 3, Return and Inversion, chapters 13 to 18. Here the spiral deepens and expands. Earlier questions resurface, but something has changed. Your system hears them differently. This final section becomes less map, more mirror, less prescription, more poetry. I step back. The chapters become a kind of living artwork that I call a kaleidoscopic imprint of life upon the fabric of mind. It's not here to be decoded. It's here to be felt. So notice what stirs, what confuses, what resonates. That's the point. Translation devices and endnotes. This book moves between multiple domains: psychology, neuroscience, folklore, spirituality, not to merge them into a single truth, but to explore how different systems echo one another in function. To help make those echoes clearer, I use what I call translation devices, symbolic, scientific pairings that bridge languages of meaning. They're not definitions, they're relational metaphors, ways to keep both hemispheres of your brain in dialogue. For example, service to other becomes co-regulation and emotional reciprocity. Vibration becomes interoceptive tone and signal accuracy. Soul polarity becomes relational momentum shaped by nervous system patterns. Density becomes developmental complexity organized by system stability. Divine timing becomes nervous system readiness and the sequencing of integration, and so on. So if something sounds too woo, look for what it's doing. Ask, what's the function beneath this form? And if it settles in your system, great. If it stirs resistance, that's signal 2. For clarity and flow, I've placed elaborations and source details in endnotes at the end of each chapter. You don't need them to understand the message, But if you want to dive deeper, they're there, like tuning forks, not footnotes. A note on the unconscious. Throughout this book, I use the word unconscious, and I want to clarify what I mean. Some prefer subconscious because it feels more alive and relational. I respect that. But here, I use unconscious in the Jungian sense, not as something passive or repressed, but as a living field of instinct, archetype, ancestral memory, and adaptive patterning. In neurobiology, this shows up as implicit memory, bottom-up processing, autonomic patterning, the silent architecture that shapes your behavior without asking for your attention. Heartbeat, startle reflex, gut knowing, signals without words, wisdom without language. When I say unconscious, I'm naming the landscape beneath your story, not to control it, but to listen more closely, to partner with it, to rewire from the inside out. Client stories. The stories you will encounter here are composites, blends of many clients, coaching experiences, and therapeutic themes. All names and details have been changed to protect confidentiality. These aren't case studies, they're invitations to resonance, to see what your nervous system recognizes. What to expect. Each chapter opens with a question. Is it just me? That's the doorway. From there, we spiral through metaphor, science, story, and symptom, through the glitch, through the signal. Here's the shape of that first turn. Chapter 1, Form versus Function. When doing everything right still feels wrong, it's time to question the system, not the self. Chapter 2, Agency as Emergence, like the brushstroke that bends inside the hand of the cosmos. Chapter 3, Wholeness as Resonance, realignment of mind, body, and spirit as layered expressions of one system. Chapter 4, Pain as Protest, not a punishment, but a signal. Chapter 5, Weight as Wisdom, the felt pressure that anchors growth. Chapter 6, Polarity as Path, each leaning as signal, each signal as soul. And beneath it all, you're not broken, you're rewiring, always. Not into who you were taught to be, but into who your entire system already is. So, take a breath, get curious, begin wherever you are because the journey is already happening. So, let's spiral in. All right, so there is the preface and the introduction. As you can tell, I'm also publishing this book as an audio podcast at its own podcast feed. You're Not Broken, Just Rewiring. I'll link to it in the episode description in case anybody is interested and wants to hear other chapters. But what I'm asking for beta readers, before I publish the print version, I'm going to go through and add all the endnotes, and I want to make sure that things are clear. So if there's questions, any feedback that you want to give me to help me get this book ready for publishing, that's what I'd really appreciate. You can email me at ncestudyguide@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening to the NCE Study Guide, and good luck with the exam and everything you're going to be doing in your careers.
1, 2, 3.
Nice to be in orbit.